I don't know where else to share this information. The reporters just laughed at me. Everyone I know said I'm trying to troll them. On internet forums, people claim I'm crazy, and then the posts get deleted by some anonymous user. If you're reading this, keep an open mind. I was walking home from school. It had snowed, and the roads were icy. So icy that a car skidded, causing an accident. The police blocked off the entire street, the very one I needed to take. It wasn't a big problem though, since I could take a longer route through the park. The park was near a large mountain, since the city was surrounded by mines. There were several caves and tunnels running through the mountain. Many of these caves served as shelter for the homeless, and kids would often dare each other to write their names on the walls. As I walked past some bushes, a strong gust of wind rushed by. Unbeknownst to me, my backpack was slightly open, and the wind blew some papers into the bushes. Cursing my carelessness, I ran to gather them. Pushing through the vegetation, I ended up at the foot of the mountain without finding the papers. As I pushed some plants aside, hoping to recover at least one, I stumbled upon a small cave entrance. At first, I hesitated to enter, worried about disturbing someone who might live there. But I soon realized that no one had been there in a long time. The plants around the entrance were untouched, neither broken nor trampled. Forgetting about the papers, I decided to explore the cave. Since it was winter and the days were darker, I had a flashlight in my backpack. Upon entering the cave, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It was a mix of sulfur and gunpowder. The second thing was the heat. It felt as though a wave of warmth emanated from deep within. Then I saw it. A massive pit in the center of the cave. The rest of the cave sloped downward, leading straight to the pit. When I shone my flashlight into it, I saw nothing but endless darkness. But the strangest part was the shape of the pit. It was a perfect circle. Looking around, I noticed the cave itself was also unusually symmetrical. I knew that mining equipment wasn't capable of creating such perfection, and the odds of it forming naturally were slim. When I pointed the flashlight toward the pit again, it slipped from my hand and fell into the depths. As it fell, it struck a rock and went out. Without the flashlight, I noticed a faint red glow emanating from the pit, right where my flashlight had just fallen. Trying to get a better view, my foot slipped and I fell into the void. When I woke up, I was enveloped in complete darkness. My head throbbed painfully and my body was bruised all over. Standing up, I felt around my surroundings. I realized I was in a circular chamber with a tunnel leading deeper into the earth. Running my hands along the walls, I noticed something strange. The walls were smoother now. Looking back toward where I'd fallen, I couldn't see any light above. I had no idea how deep I had fallen or how I had survived. Thinking about light, I remembered the red glow I'd seen earlier, but now it was gone. I thought I must have imagined it. Still disoriented, I tried to figure out what to do. Considering how hidden the cave entrance was, I doubted anyone would find me if they searched. The walls were far too smooth to climb. It seemed my only option was to follow the tunnel. I hoped it might lead me back to the surface. I walked for what felt like ages, going deeper and deeper into the tunnel. Finally, I saw the red glow again. The moment I saw it, it began to retreat. Desperate for light, I started running after it. Any light was better than the oppressive darkness. I kept getting closer and closer until I stopped in a large chamber. At the center was a massive stone emanating that red glow. As I examined the area, I noticed the chamber had a strange shape. It resembled a crater lined with stones. Upon closer inspection of the stone at the center, I saw its texture was vastly different from the walls and floor. It looked like a meteorite. But how could a meteorite have ended up so deep underground? Perhaps it had struck the earth ages ago and somehow got buried? And the most pressing question, what was producing the red glow? A sudden, inexplicable fear gripped me as I stared at the stone. It almost felt alive. My curiosity got the better of me and I began to approach it. I got close enough to touch it, but I pulled my hand back immediately. The stone was scalding hot. Circling it, I noticed a small hole leading into its interior. Peering through, I glimpsed a part of the meteor's core. It looked as though something was moving inside. Sinister, writhing shapes that danced like solid smoke under a pulsating red light. Before I could process what I was seeing, an intense pressure struck my chest, as though the air around me had been violently displaced. I was hurled backward, slamming into one of the chamber walls. The pain jolted me back to reality, and as I tried to stand, I noticed the light from the stone had intensified. It seemed to vibrate. It was as if the sound and light were synchronized, creating a hypnotic effect that made my heartbeat match its rhythm. Still on the ground, I tried to crawl away, but something caught my attention in the corner of the chamber. There were marks on the ground that I hadn't noticed before. Deep scratches as if made by something with enormous claws. Following the marks with my eyes, I saw they formed a pattern, almost like lines converging toward the stone at the center. Every second that passed, the environment seemed stranger. It was as if the chamber was alive, breathing, reacting to my presence. I touched the ground impulsively, and it was hot, too hot to be natural, as if the entire area was connected to the heat of the stone. Forcing myself to stand, I began exploring the edges of the chamber, trying to find another exit. But as I walked, I noticed something even more terrifying. The walls were changing. It wasn't just my imagination. The previously smooth texture now displayed something resembling pulsing veins, emitting a faint reddish glow. Suddenly, I heard a sound, a low, constant hum, charged with an energy that made my bones vibrate. I turned toward the stone and saw that the small hole I had peeked through was widening, slowly, like a mouth opening. The red light became even more intense, bathing the entire chamber in shades of blood. A black substance began oozing from the opening. It was thick, almost viscous, moving as if it had a will of its own. I tried to back away, but something made me stop. It wasn't just fear. It was a deeper sensation, as if something within it was calling to me. A hissing sound, almost imperceptible, began echoing through the chamber, forming words I couldn't understand, but that seemed to be spoken directly into my mind. The black substance formed a kind of pattern on the ground, something that resembled symbols or ancient runes. They briefly glowed before disappearing. I felt a sharp pain in my head, as if something was trying to force its way into my brain. I fell to my knees, clutching my head as flashes of images appeared in my mind. I saw worlds shrouded in darkness, with deformed and grotesque creatures crawling under eternally red skies. I saw gigantic towers made of flesh and metal, pulsating like living hearts. I heard screams, not just human screams, but something deeper, something ancient, something that seemed to come from beings that should never exist. When the images stopped, the chamber was different. The ground was now covered in those symbols, faintly pulsing. The stone at the center had changed. Its surface was cracked, and from within emerged a form, humanoid, but definitely not human. It was tall, with a slender body covered in the same black substance that had oozed from the stone. Its eyes were slits of light, glowing red so intensely it felt like they were piercing directly into my soul. It stood still for a moment, just watching me. A bone-chilling cold ran down my spine, as if all the heat in the chamber had been drained. When I tried to move, my legs didn't respond. It was as if the creature had some control over me. Without making a sound, it began to move one of its hands toward me. The moment its long pointed fingers got close to me, I felt an electric current surge through my body. It wasn't physical pain, but something deeper. It was as if it was sifting through my mind, my thoughts, my memories. Suddenly, the lights in the chamber went out, leaving only the creature's eyes glowing in the darkness. And then, something even more unsettling happened. A voice, deep, reverberating, and clearly not human, spoke directly into my mind. "You were not meant to be here, but now that you've seen, there is no way back." Before I could respond, I felt the ground beneath me shake violently. I looked around, and the chamber walls began to crack, as if something even larger was trying to emerge from within the mountain. The creature turned back toward the meteor and, with a quick motion, entered the opening again, disappearing completely. But the cracks kept spreading. Something was coming, and I needed to get out of there before it was too late. The ground shook harder and harder, and the chamber seemed to be collapsing around me. Pieces of rock started falling from the ceiling, each impact echoing deafeningly through the cave. Instinctively, I threw myself to the side to avoid being crushed by a particularly large rock. The creature was gone, but its presence still lingered in the air, as if something invisible was watching me. The symbols on the ground glowed intensely, pulsing in sync with the tremors of the chamber. It was as if the entire structure was alive, reacting to whatever was about to emerge. I needed to get out. Struggling, I forced myself to stand and began desperately searching for an exit. The cracks in the walls now emitted a hot, dense vapor, making it hard to breathe. The heat was becoming unbearable, and the air was filled with static electricity, making my skin tingle. As I explored the chamber's edges, I noticed something I had previously missed. A small tunnel on the opposite side of where I had entered. It was narrow and inclined upward. A possible escape route. There was no other choice. I ran toward the tunnel, but something made me stop. A sound. No, several sounds, coming from the central pit. It was a deep, rhythmic noise, like a drum, mixed with a continuous hum that made my teeth vibrate. And then I heard the screams. They were not human screams. They were guttural, inhuman, as if something was suffering or awakening. I couldn't help but look back, and what I saw nearly froze me in fear. The meteor in the center of the chamber was changing again. The crack the creature had left was now widening even more, and something enormous began to stir inside. Two shapes emerged. They were much larger than the first creature, with monstrous bodies covered in glowing, pulsating spikes. Their eyes were black holes that seemed to suck in all the light around them, while lines of red light ran through their bodies like exposed veins. The creatures roared, and the sound reverberated through the chamber, making my legs nearly give out. They began to move slowly, as if adjusting to the world outside the meteor. Despite the terror I felt, something in my mind told me these were just the first of many. The thought filled me with panic, and I turned my attention back to the tunnel. Without thinking twice, I crawled into it, ignoring the cuts and scratches the narrow walls caused on my skin. The tunnel was steep, and each step was an effort. The heat continued to rise, and my heart pounded in my chest as if it were about to explode. With every second, the sounds of the chamber grew more distant, but I could feel that I was not safe. The buzzing still echoed through the tunnel, as if those creatures were chasing me, even though I couldn't see them. After what felt like an eternity, I saw a small light ahead. My hope reignited, and I quickened my pace, ignoring the exhaustion that threatened to knock me down. As I got closer, I realized it was the natural daylight. I was almost out of there, but as I neared the exit, a new sound paralyzed me. It was a whisper, soft but unmistakable, coming from inside my own mind. You can't escape. You are part of it now. The light at the exit seemed to grow more distant, as if the tunnel was stretching. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus, but the whisper grew louder, turning into a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, all saying the same thing. You are ours. Finally, I gathered all my strength and ran toward the light. When I reached the opening, I threw myself out, falling onto the snow-covered ground. The cold air was an immediate relief, burning my lungs as I breathed desperately. I looked around. I was back in the park, at the foot of the mountain. The cave behind me had completely collapsed, blocking any access to the tunnel. I lay there for a moment, trying to process what had happened, but something was not right. The park was empty. There was no one around. Not even the distant sound of cars or people. The silence was absolute, broken only by the wind blowing through the trees. When I looked up at the sky, I noticed it had a strange hue, a mix of gray and red, as if the world itself had changed while I had been down there. I struggled to my feet, and that's when I felt it. Something inside me, a sensation I couldn't explain. It wasn't pain, but something was moving, a presence I couldn't ignore. And then, at the edge of the park, a huge, grotesque shadow watching me from afar. I was not alone out here, and the worst part, I knew those creatures were no longer confined underground. The park was empty, and the silence around me was almost suffocating him. When I finally stood up, struggling against the pain in every muscle of my body, I realized something was wrong. The sky was smeared with shades of gray and red, as if an apocalyptic storm was forming. The air felt heavy, and an eerie sensation of being watched wouldn't leave me. I looked around, trying to find some explanation, but everything was empty. Then, in the distance, at the edge of the park, a grotesque shadow moved. Tall, inhuman, with outlines that seemed to change, It was watching me. I took a few steps back, but my legs gave out. I fell to my knees, feeling something inside me. A presence, something that seemed to be growing or waiting. The whisper I had heard in the tunnel returned, echoing in my mind as if it was part of me. You are part of it now. I tried to ignore it, fighting against the fear and confusion, but I knew this wasn't over. The cave had collapsed, but those things weren't trapped there. They were free now, and something told me this was just the beginning. I woke up in the hospital with burns and multiple fractures. The nurse said they found me collapsed in some bushes in the park, right next to a collapsed cave. When I told my story, they said it was impossible. The cave was blocked by thousands of stones, and since my legs were broken, I couldn't have walked that far. They thought someone mugged me and knocked me out before I could react. They said my story was just a dream, but I know it couldn't be. Why, when I looked into that meteor, I didn't just see stones in there. I saw things spread out and stuck all over the inside of the meteor. They were sleeping, except for the one that woke up earlier, the one that came out of the meteor, the one that produced the red light I had seen, the same one that knocked me out inside that cave. That thing dragged me out. That thing sealed the cave so they wouldn't be discovered. And it also tried to put eggs inside me, but it failed. The doctor saw it on the X-ray. He removed them, and he was so horrified that he passed out shortly after removing them. They threw the eggs away, unaware of what they were. Now there is no proof. No proof of those things crawling underground, digging toward the surface. They are developing beneath our planet, while we think our greatest enemies are ourselves. Because I'm sure it wasn't just a meteor. They must be everywhere, below everyone, all over the world, and their inhabitants must be waking up right now. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.